And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
One of my goals for 2014 is to have every game that's in my collection reviewed with a video review, and so I have to talk about a game that I really enjoy, and that is Domaine. Domaine is from Klaus Teuber, and you probably know him as the designer of Settlers of Catan, which is an extremely popular game. Domaine is actually a reworking of an earlier game that Klaus designed, which was called Lowenherz. Lowenherz and Domaine are very similar. There's some differences, and there's some great debate actually as to which game's better. It's Domaine. But there are many people who like Lowenherz just as much. Domaine is a game about expanding domains, expanding kingdoms on a board. And it can be very mean, but it also has very simple mechanisms and some great pieces. Let me show you. The board for this game is built randomly in the sense that there are 8 of these tiles which can be rotated in various ways and placed around the board. There's one tile that's always in the middle that has the king's castle in it and has one of different mines. There's different terrain types on the board. There's forest, there's plains, there's mines of 4 different types. There's villages, and then the king's castle. At the beginning of the game, players will take turns placing one of their castles on a plain spot and then a knight next to it. The knight can go in a plains or a forest spot, and each of your castles has to be at least 6 spaces away from your other castles. So this is an example setup. Players are going to draw a handful of cards from a deck that is progressive, and what I mean by there's A's on top of B's on top of C's on top of D's. And so you'll shuffle the different stacks, put them on there, give players cards. One player goes first, and then you just take turns going around a table. Now on your turn, you're going to do one of 2 things. Either you're going to play a card, and when you play a card, you pay the cost up here in ducats, and the cards will get more expensive as the game goes by. I'm showing you some cards from near the end of the game, and the ducats are really cool big coin pieces. Or you can discard the card and take that many ducats. When you discard a card, you place it up here in the chancery. And the reason you do that is, at the end of your turn, if you play a card, you draw a card from the top of the deck, or you can draw a card from the chancery. So when you give up a card, you're giving that card to somebody else. Now, the different cards that you can play. There's building walls. These will show 1, 2, or 3 walls on them. And by the way, I should mention that there are several of the action cards that have 2 different actions, and you take one of those. Now, the game is all going to be about building domains. And as you build walls, you're going to build domains. So here's 3 walls, but let's say that red has spent some time here and actually builds themselves a small domain. When you finish a domain can only have 1 castle inside it. So this one has a castle, and as the game is progressing, maybe white starts building it like this, and orange tries to cut it off and make white into a small domain. So here's 2 domains. When a domain is formed, you're going to get 1 point for every forest and 3 points for every village in immediately. So those are good things to get. The villages are very useful to have, and the king's castle is worth 5 points to have in the middle. Now, so players are going to be building walls. This is one of the main features of the game, to build these walls. Once a domain is finished, players can expand that domain. They can play this card. This lets you expand it twice. Some cards let you expand it once. If red played an expand domain, let's say they played expand twice, they get to take over 2 squares. So they decide to take over these 2 squares. So they just move the walls around like this and take those 2 squares over. Now, let's say that they wanted to do that exact same thing. That's 4 points for them added to their score. But let's say that blue had a domain here. Red could not expand into blue's domain because blue has 1 knight in their domain and red has 1 knight in their domain. Now, there are cards, many cards, that let you add 1 or 2 knights to your domain. They're normally free. You put them next to your castle or next to a knight that you have. If you put them in a forest, they cost a ducat to play. So let's say that red had 2 knights and blue has 1. At this point, red can do the same thing they just did. which would be expanding into these two areas. They can't go into a spot where there's a knight and a tower, but that's no big deal. So they expand in these two areas, and not only did they take these two from blue, but they cut blue off from these two spots, so blue's kingdom just got a lot smaller. Other things that you can do as the game progresses is you can play this, which is basically a traitor knight. Red might play this on white, and white loses one of their knights, and red gains a knight. You can't do this to somebody's last knight. You have to leave them at least one. And then there's this treaty, this truce. When this happens, you take one of the walls between your domain and another player's domain and turn it sideways like that. That means for the rest of the game, neither one of those domains can expand into the other one. The game is going to progress like this, and you'll see these walls grow out through the board. The walls will grow and branch, and the different domains will be formed with the different castles around the board. At the beginning of your turn, you will get extra ducats if you control mines. You get 1 ducat for each type of mine you control. So if you have a diamond, silver, copper, and gold mine, the most different mines there are, you get 4. You also gain 5 points immediately if you control all 4 mines of the same type. So if you have all 4 gold mines, you will get those points. So that's basically the game. It's at the end of the game, there's also some points for whoever has the most money, but the game will end when one player gets to a certain number, and that depends on the number of players. So in a 4-player game, first person to 30 will end the game, and then you add the money for the most ducats, the points for the most ducats, and whoever has the most points is the winner. Domaine has a special spot in my heart because, let's see, it came out in 2002, I believe, which is 12 years ago, or 2003, 11 years ago, and my wife went out 10 years ago for my birthday to a store and randomly bought it, hoping that it would be a game I liked, and lo and behold, it was, and it's a game that I still have in my collection today. And I am very enamored with this game for many reasons. It's easy to play, and there's that tension the whole game about trying to make your domain. You watch this wall go, and I make it curve a little bit to make my domain bigger. You make it curve back to make yours bigger. I'm like, oh, forget this. I'm going to close it now, make my domain, and then start expanding out and grab the good spots, the good villages, or maybe even that king's castle in the middle. Everyone's fighting over that spot. Getting mines is also important. They don't give you points, but getting that influx of money every turn can really help that you don't need to discard cards. Almost all your turns could be playing cards. That's a big deal. The whole concept of play a card, discard it for money, or pay to play it is a great one, and I'm really surprised that more game designers haven't copied it. It's been used in other games, but it's such a simple but obviously cool idea, and when you sit there and you're like, oh man, I need the money, but I don't want to get rid of this card because so-and-so is going to need it. They're going to want to take this card and use it maybe against me. The knights and the battling back and forth, it's not as brutal as it might seem on the onset, but it can be pretty sneaky. You can cut someone's kingdom. If you do a good move, sometimes you'll take a piece of land you don't even need, just to cut someone's kingdom completely in half and cut them off from some really good point-valued stuff. Games are not long. This is a 60-minute to 70-minute game. Easy to set up, easy to teach. I always was surprised that it wasn't more popular than it is, but I think it's absolutely fantastic. This is Domaine: Land, Wealth, Power, Prestige. Sounds cool, looks cool, and it's fun.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.
Shut the door!